Countless young lives are being lost to prescription and illegal drug abuse. And unfortunately, many who return to their previous high schools after getting treatment will relapse. And here to discuss a plan to combat this and help save our children is State Representative John Taylor. Welcome.
Hi, Laurie.
Good to have you today. And this is a very serious topic, but it's one that definitely needs to be discussed. Can you just define the problem of drug abuse in our communities and what often happens when a young person goes through treatment and then returns back home?
Well, the problem of drug abuse is certainly not new, but in America, in Pennsylvania, and particularly Philadelphia, and particularly my section of Philadelphia, it's it's at epidemic proportions. I mean, we're probably 10 times the number of drug overdose deaths in Pennsylvania than we had in 2003. It's affected every community in Pennsylvania, even very rural communities. So the recovery school is just one step of many to try to combat people, to combat the problem and help people after they're addicted. In particular, there's one recovery high school in Philadelphia, the only one in the state. And that's a place where a kid can go after he or she comes out of rehabilitation and does not have to be put back in the same high school from which they became addicted. But it's a private school, and it's an expensive private school, and we think that not just people with means should have the ability to get help and go to a recovery school. But there's a lot of challenges you have in trying to create that kind of thing and use public money for this, but it's happening in every segment of society. So everybody has equal opportunity to be affected by this.
So you have a bill, I believe also there's a companion bill in the Senate as well. That would deal with recovery schools and create a pilot program. Can you talk about how that process would work?
Yeah, Senator Pat Brown and I have introduced similar pieces of legislation. And this would create a sort of an approved private school model where a child through the district would apply because of their rehabilitation. They have to be in rehabilitation, they have to be sober, they have to be actively working to defeat their disease. And they would apply to be assigned to a recovery school like the Bridgeway program that exists in Philadelphia. And with it would go the school district and state funding. So we would share the cost between the Pennsylvania Department of Education and the individual school district.
Okay.
And we're going to add, like 20 students to this program and see how it works over a couple years. We're hoping at the end of a few years we'll have more recovery schools. There's about 16 other states that have recovery schools throughout America, and we want to make this a real opportunity for kids in Pennsylvania.
How would the school be accountable for the results, the educational results of the students, and for the money that's
so in two ways. One, in the same way that every other school and every other student is accountable, because this is a school with a recovery model and recovery support, rather than a treatment center that happens to do some education. So this is a full-blown high school. Secondly, it'll have specific accountability to the legislature and to the Department of Education under this pilot. And that's really will determine whether it becomes a permanent situation rather than just a model. We want to make sure that the kids achieve at the same levels that other kids achieve. And frankly, the academic piece of this is really not the problem for these kids. These kids sometimes are very motivated, very bright, and tuned into education, but also addicted.
So the problem when returning to the old school, it's not so much the school's fault as it is they're returning to the same friends that maybe influenced them and the same pressures and problems maybe that they had prior. And the support system wouldn't be there in the same way as a specialized school. Is that the idea?
Yeah, correct. I mean, it's really not the school's problem at all, but it's the peer group that he or she is part of. We've had situations where, in one story is a young woman who comes home to her mother and after rehabilitation. She said, I'm sitting in high school, and right next to me, I'm sitting next to my drug dealer. That is not a way to get better, because without this type of help, 50% of those kids relapse within the first year. And every time one relapses, they lose hope a little bit, and we have to fight even that much harder to get them back.
And what is the reasoning for having two bills, one in the House, one in the Senate?
Well, that just gives you double the shot of getting it done, depending on the legislative track of each. It's the same bill. Either one of them will be fine. You know how it is around here when the Senate and the House start trading bills back and forth, and there's a whole process there. So whichever one of these is in the best position, and if we found a vehicle to which we can just attach either one of these concepts, we'll do that as well.
Okay.
We'd like to get this up and running before the end of June. I would usually say before the end of a budget season, but that's not something you can count on around here anymore, but we want to get it going as soon as possible.
And just to end our time here, can you offer maybe a testimony of someone that's gone through a recovery school, things that you've heard from folks who have experienced this?
We had a mother testify in front of us early at the press conference about her son, who was an A student, ended up not only using but dealing in and out of some juvenile facilities. Couldn't do well until he got into rehabilitation, came out and went to the Bridgeway School, and has never looked back. He's been clean and sober for years now. He's in the middle of college. And until you get that little bit of longevity in a sober environment, you have a better shot at staying clean and being productive. And it could hit any one of them and any one of us at any time. So the more support you have around you, the more elements that are there to help makes a difference.
Sounds like it would be a great resource. In addition, you're working on different fronts on this topic, and you're hosting some community meetings coming up. What are the goals?
Yeah,
of
we're
that?
in our in the middle of a number of community meetings in each part of the district. I think every legislator should pay particular attention to this. We have a network of support of people who are in the rehabilitation world. We have mothers who lost children. We have kids who are in recovery. I can tell the real life story of what's going on out there. And slowly but surely, we're getting more and more residents who just want to learn, might have a problem. I mean, I don't think there's few people in Pennsylvania right now that's not associated with a drug problem somewhere. And we're working on other legislation. I think it's really important for us to really work hard to get this administration and every administration to spend some money on driving down demand. We spend $30 million for a 30-second ad for the Super Bowl, and the reason people do that is because it works. So we should spend some money from the state level to really talk to kids about not asking for prescription drugs when they get hurt or go to the doctor. And really the key is to ask doctors not to prescribe it in the first place, which is very difficult. Doctors want to make people's pain go away, but these drugs are eventually getting abused, sometimes sold, and in many cases are not necessary. I would rather risk, if it was my child, I would rather risk a little extra pain after taking Advil than taking Percocet or Vicodin or any other opiates that end up making you need them and want them and eventually turn into heroin. So that's what's happening. That's the pattern, and we're trying to avoid that.
Well, thank you so much for your work on this. And if you want more information about those community meetings, you can check Representative Taylor's website. And if you have comments or questions about this or any other thing, just contact him at his local office, also at that website, and we'll show you that information in just a moment. Thanks for spending a few minutes with State Representative John Taylor.